what are these desert detention centers that the government is rounding people into? It's funny because at the beginning, Israeli people, like most people in the world, want to have a positive self-image. They want to think of themselves as good people. So they couldn't allow themselves to imagine that this was a horrible place. So the government pitched this to the population as some kind of country club, with recreational facilities and with educational facilities. I mean, like, you wanted to go there. It sounded so good the way they made it sound. Of course, it's horrible, as you can imagine. It's in the middle of the desert on the border with Egypt. It's surrounded by nothing except a firing range. They've got nowhere to go and nothing to do. They're crammed into these trailers with no heating in the middle of the winter. There's no insulation, nothing. They don't even have hot water half the time. Food, if you can call it that. Often they miss meals. I don't know what this pink goop is supposed to be. It's certainly not food by any stretch of the imagination. No nutritional content, no fruits, no vegetables, nothing. No educational, no recreational. There aren't even medical services there. How negligent can you get? I mean, a country that supposedly can send, delegations to Haiti and to all these other places in the world where they suffer from natural disasters, it can't even murderers and rapists deserve medical attention. Here, they don't even provide medical attention. NGOs like Physicians for Human Rights have to come in on the weekends and open up clinics on the ground outside these detention centers. That's how pathetic it is there. And probably the most insulting aspect of all is this sign that they put up. The Office of Employment. Employment for the society. I couldn't imagine a more Orwellian sign at the entrance to a detention center. This is the only thing they've left for us to be reminded of. Arbeit macht frei, the entrance to Auschwitz. Now, are you offended that I would make such a comparison, that I would dare compare these detention centers to concentration camps? Well, you damn well should be offended. And you should direct your anger and your rage to the Israeli government, who isn't even embarrassed to use these words. They know no one's looking. They know no one cares. So even in that official government report that I described earlier, released in March 2013, look it up yourself. It's online in the Hebrew. I've translated it here for your benefit. It calls for the concentration of Africans. Open up any Hebrew English dictionary in the world, and you will find that the word rikuz is translated as concentration, and a machane rikuz is a concentration camp. Okay? Now, don't get it twisted. I didn't say death camp. I don't think there's any firing squads or crematoria or gas chambers or anything like that. Nothing like that. But it is a concentration camp. Okay? A concentration camp is a place where people are forced to live under harsh conditions because of their political opinions or because of their ethnic affiliation. And that's what's happening to these Africans because they're non-white, non-Jews, and no other reason. Concentration camps existed long before Nazi Germany. United States opened up and rounded Cherokee Indians into concentration camps as far back as the 1830s, and many nations since then. And after World War II, many countries opened up concentration camps. Sadly, many countries have done this well before and well after World War II. Okay? And that is what's happening today in Israel. Even the president of Eritrea, this despicable man who's responsible for thousands of his own countrymen fleeing every month, even he is called these detention centers, concentration camps. And frankly, he's not the only president to do so, because this man, Reuven Rivlin, member of Knesset, former Speaker of the Knesset, and currently the leading candidate to be the next president of Israel, publicly called these detention centers concentration camps. Okay? So take it up with them if you're offended. And all you need to do is speak Hebrew. Okay? Anyone who speaks fluent Hebrew can go online any day of the week and just read an average news report. Here, this occurred a week before I came on this speaking tour. Channel 10 News reports an Israeli man attacks an African man in Tel Aviv for no reason. That's the news report. The responses, this is the kinds of responses that people give. In their own names, connected to their own personal Facebook accounts. No sense of shame whatsoever. Too bad they didn't tear him to pieces, the disgusting blackie. They should get the hell out, those contaminants. All they brought was diseases and pollution. Go home already, you garbage. And as I said, if you think it's bad the way people speak about Africans, you have to hear what they say to those few Israelis who stand in solidarity with them. So that man who started up Marak Levinsky, that soup kitchen for African asylum seekers, this is what people write on his Facebook page. They need to turn that center I'm paying for into gas chambers. They need to bring snipers to shoot all these monkeys. And that's to the men. You don't even want to hear what they say to the Israeli women who stand up for the human rights of Africans. And this is probably the sickest example that I can think of, and there's many, sadly. But this one is the grossest, probably. This envelope, this is a piece of junk mail that Israelis received in the mail in late 2012. I've, again, translated it into English so you can see. The solution to the problem of the infiltrators is what it says on the outside of the envelope. So the average Israeli picks this up from their post office box and they see, oh, this is someone proposing what to do about these African asylum seekers. And they open it up and they find an advertisement for insect extermination. Now, this company isn't trying to convince Israelis to compare Africans to insects that deserve to be exterminated. It's actually worse than that. It's far more insidious. It's that this company assumes that you already think that, assumes that you already conceive of African asylum seekers as equivalent to insects that enter your home and must be exterminated. It's counting on you to find that comparison funny. Not be offended by it, but to find it funny. And on the basis of this chuckle that it elicits from you, to call them up and secure their services. That's how sick it gets. That's the level of discourse in Israel around non-white, non-Jewish people. Okay? And I don't need to tell you how in the lead up to World War II, you had this anti-Jewish propaganda comparing Jews to vermin, to insects, spreading this idea that they are disease bearers and therefore dehumanizing them to the point where anything was possible. Of course, again, it's not only about Nazi Germany. In the United States, at the same time, you had the United States government putting out this propaganda, vilifying Japanese people as deserving of death, comparing them to rats. But that's the level of hate, saying these people are deserving of being murdered. And why is it that when journalist Max Blumenthal puts out his book Goliath just a few months ago, and he describes these scenes taking place in Israel, and he calls the chapter titles the concentration camp to describe the detention centers, and calling the anti-African riot, calling it the night of the broken glass, evoking Kristallnacht on the eve of the Holocaust. So why is it that when he makes these comparisons, that American Jewish intellectuals are vociferous in their attack on Max? How dare he make this comparison? Yet these so-called intellectuals have not one word of criticism about the actual events described in the book. They've got nothing to say about the government's war on Africans. January 2014, African family standing in downtown Tel Aviv, woman holding her child, her 1-year-old baby in her arms. An Israeli man walks up and stabs the baby in the head 3 times. Of course, within minutes, the police were quickly issuing press reports. No, this was not related to racism in any way. This man was just crazy and, drunk and... Please. Of course, it was a white man who perpetrated the crime and a black victim, so of course there was no racism involved. Oh, he must have been crazy. Where have I heard that one before? Well, in the weeks that followed, sure enough, this man's confessions were released to the media, and then we saw for ourselves what he had to say. Why did you attack this baby? I tried to kill her because I hate them. They're black. A black baby. Blacks in general are terrorists. Did the daughter of a whore die? Now, I don't mean for a second to suggest that this is across the board, that all Israelis can be compared to this man. Clearly, anyone who stabs a 1-year-old baby is psychotic and can't be compared to, the masses. But why did he stab a black baby? Because for months and for years, the Israeli government has been inciting racial hatred towards Africans. How long does this have to go on for? How many more black babies? What can we take from this? The people who want to kick out these kids because they're not Jewish are morally no different from the people who wanted to kick out these kids because they were Jewish. And the only moral lesson that we can take from the Holocaust is not never again just for us. It has to be never again for anyone. And if there's one final thought I want to leave you with before I conclude my words, it's that just now, as I'm touring across North America, trying to inform people of what's going on in Israel, the Israeli government is sending, Netanyahu himself is in the United States, and they're sending other emissaries and people to put out these messages, to counter the truth, to try to portray Palestinians as intransigent and convince the entire world that they, the Palestinians and all the Arabs and the Martians and the Venusians and the Alpha Centauris and the whole universe must accept Israel's self-definition as the Jewish state. Okay? It's saying that you must accept this as a condition for a peace deal. That Israel must be acknowledged to be the Jewish state. Well, this is what that looks like. Okay? And this is before you get the blank check. Imagine if the world signs off on this blank check and lets Israel self-define as a Jewish state and acknowledges that it's a Jewish state. Imagine what it's capable of. If this is what it can do without that, imagine what it'll do to the non-Jewish people who live there once you give it a blank check to do as it will. So, unfortunately, I don't have any happy story to conclude with, to end it on a cheerful note. But I just want to implore you to, at your leisure, go onto my website, read these articles, watch the videos. I have over 100 resources on this topic. The mainstream media is censoring it. It doesn't want people to know what's happening. Go there, find out for yourselves, and spread this. Only through citizens networks and your social circles, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, can we spread the word, and only then can we hope to perhaps create some kind of consensus or some kind of pressure from the international community to end this ethnic cleansing. That's it.